Hello, my friend. Welcome back to the Mindset Check podcast. I'm your host, Misha McKittrick. This is a podcast where I believe that as you take time for a mindset check, you have more power than you think you do. And where we also believe that when we live a balanced life, we have more access to our power. I'm really excited to introduce you to today's guest. Before we go there, I want to tell you about something that I am so excited about that I'm creating. So you know how we talk about heart coherence a lot on this podcast, and I have a course that teaches you how to find heart coherence, what it's all about, and all of those things. Well, part of being in heart coherence every single day is intentionally taking the time to meditate. And a lot of times on my journey for finding meditations that are really good for me, I come up lacking. And so I've decided to create these meditation collections, and each one will have 5 or more meditations in them, and they will each have a topic of maybe something that you're striving towards or wanting to connect with. So for example, if you are a creator and it would help you to get into a state of flow, then we'll have a collection for all of my friends that are creators. And that's, whether you're doing an art piece, if you're writing a book or a letter to a family member, whatever it is that you're trying to create or to learn or to absorb, to be in heart coherence, you can do that so much better. So that's one example of the meditation collection that we will have available. I also feel like it's important to have a meditation collection, helps you align your heart with heaven. So we will have a meditation collection about that. I'll have a meditation collection for young moms. And all of these collections help you have the mindset to ponder about the space that you're in and the affirmations to help you move forward in whatever it is that you are really drawing forward and creating in your life. So there are so many topics, and more are coming, that are available on my website, and I will leave a link in the show notes for where you can find these meditation collections. All right, and for those of you who are new to the podcast, I want to give you a little bit of background of what the podcast consists of, because we have shifted gears wildly from season 1, 2, and 3. So right now we are in season 3, but in season 1, I shared with you from my personal journal from when I was 15 and pregnant. And I went through a lot of ups and downs. And so the podcast is really about finding joy in the struggle and light in the darkness. I was navigating through a rocky relationship and a lot of low vibration and betrayal. And I learned a lot while I was going through it. But what was really cool and powerful is to revisit it a lot later in my life to be able to see like what I could lend to myself, like what I wish I would have known. And it's a really cool story of the things that I went through, but how when we hold space for this little 14-year-old girl, we're all learning and growing as we go through it. We also talk about grief in season 1 because of what happens with my little girl. And there's just a lot of talk about forgiveness. So it's a really like in-depth and fun season to listen to. And then in season 2, we talk a lot about the vulnerable side of my current husband's story and how he came into the picture after we once went out in the 6th grade. And we go through the incredible ways that life works and how to look for ways that you're being led. And we talk about navigating through relationships when not everything is peaches, right? And we also talk a lot about the tragic loss of his cousin to suicide. And so we really dive deeply into that, which is also super appropriate for the month of September, right? That is just past us, because I think that that kind of comes onto our mind and into our feed a lot with it being, the month where we bring awareness around that. And so we address that from all different sides. If you're the one that's looking for the light, or if you're the one that's helping someone through the light, or maybe you're on the other side of it and trying to find peace after you've been rocked by suicide. So it's kind of like an in-depth thing, but then we also just talk about like how we came together through that story. And then in season 3, we're talking a lot about our internal state and what we already have inside of us as power to be able to create our state inside of us. And when we do that, how it creates the world around us to be something completely different. We talk about frequencies and vibrations, thoughts, emotions, and how we can check into our heart to help us move through life in a very effective and mindful way. So we also have guest interviews on season 3, and we also have Hey Mish episodes where you can reach out to me and ask a question, and then we'll dive into it on the podcast. Ultimately, what we go over here is helping you see that you have more power than you think you do in every single episode. And that brings us to today's episode. We get to sit down and chat with Lindsay Banner. And Lindsay Banner is a really great friend of mine from like 20 years ago. We used to live near each other. We really had a connection then. And I'm really excited to be able to like reconnect with her in this episode. Lindsay is a wife and a mom to 4 kids, ages 12 to 20. Her and her husband, Mike, both grew up in Southern California, and they've lived in 4 different states, moved home 16 times in their 22 years of marriage. They've had a lot of shifting. We talk about that a little bit. And we talk about how Lindsay owned an online baby boutique for 9 years when her kids were younger. And she decided to take a few years off to really enjoy being more of a stay-at-home mom, and how she adapted into finding something that helps her be with her kids a little bit more. She now does an online affiliate marketing, and she's so expressive in the way that she is able to pull us into creating our life with a little bit more vigor and enjoyment through the things that she shares that help us create our life in really fun ways. So for example, she shares links that help you to enrich your life without you having to do a ton of planning in the background about it. It's a really great account that she runs on Instagram at Banner & Co Favorites. And I'll link that account for you in the show notes. So without further ado, let's jump into chatting with Lindsay Banner and see what you can absorb from this incredible soul. Lindsay, I'm so glad that you are here.
I'm so excited to be here. I feel like it was just yesterday that we were neighbors.
Yeah.
But it wasn't. It was like 18 years ago.
Yeah.
Yet I feel like we're both exactly the same person. Like no time has passed. Like no big deal. We've birthed multiple kids. Our kids are like half of them are becoming adults now. And here we are all these years later getting to connect still so closely, even though we don't even live in the same city anymore. It's so fun.
I know. This is so beautiful.
Well, it's fun to see you doing this because this is who you've always been. Like I feel like you've always had this part of you. And so to see your life, I feel like as moms, we're so busy raising and doing all that for so many years. And then down the line, sometimes we have a little more time, you know, a little bit more breathing space.
Yeah.
And to see you do this, I feel like it feels like a perfect fit. So I'm excited to be here.
I love that you say that because it's the flip side for me watching you. And one of the things that I love is that the way that we're both performing in the world, in other words, the way that we're showing up in our business or you know, just like what we are feeling called to do, it's really an extension of what has always been as a seed inside of us. So that's what's really cool. And we get to have exposure with each other that way, even though that we are farther away from each other. But I interact with you like, I don't want to say daily, but on the weekly basis, literally, because, you know, what you're doing is something that I feel drawn into. And it's like, it also has a little bit of an addictive, like which is so good. It's
I know.
just,
But it's, it's, yeah, I totally get what you're saying. And it's the
yeah.
biggest compliment when somebody tells me they had to mute me for a while. I take that as the biggest compliment.
I've never had to mute you. I've never had to mute you. But here's what I will say. Well, okay, so first I have like two things to say based on what we were just talking about, because the essence of you is literally coming out in what you do as well. And it's, I mean, going back to the days when we were young and starting to have babies as moms, and the parties that you threw and the attention that you gave to the details and the people, the way you loved them, the
Oh,
way
to
that you
be
cared from people by creating things and giving and loving, and that's it.
it's so funny because, to be a young mom with so much energy and
Yeah.
like the parties 20 years ago that I used to have time to put together. Like it was so fun, but I laugh because the get-togethers I do now
Yeah.
are, hey, 20, 30 best friends, do you want to come sit by the pool with me? Like
Good for
that,
you.
that is because as we grow up, as fun as those over the top parties are, and they are, like I still every once in a while I get the opportunity to do something like that, and it's super fun and I love it. But as we grow older, we easily see that what we love about those parties are the
Mm-hmm.
connection, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's like
Mm-hmm.
that's what we want. That's all
Right.
anybody cares about. And everybody coming, like they love the detail fun parties, but they also just love the connection parties just as much. Like,
Totally.
do you want to come sit by the pool? Yes, because
Yeah.
we're
Yeah.
just all sitting there chatting, connecting. So it is fun to see that, you can do either. Like it doesn't even have to
Mm-hmm.
be anything. Like I literally the past couple of weeks, and I'm sad I didn't get to do it this week, but the past couple of weeks, because I knew we're coming in the fall and it's going to
Mm-hmm.
start getting cold. So we've got to
Yeah.
take advantage of the sun and the pool as much as we can.
Yeah.
I literally will like run all my errands in the morning, get my work done, do a few things, maybe brush my hair, and have all my friends from the neighborhood just show up and we just sit by the pool. And
Mm-hmm.
that is great. That's
Yeah.
all. I do believe that making the effort to like pull people together and connect people, I think goes a really long way no matter where you live. And
Right.
yeah,
And really you have been doing that forever, pulling people together. And I think that there's a couple of things to say about what you just said. I think it's great for people to see, especially if they're in the young mom era or in the era of feeling like they need to kind of go over the top to do things, that it's really enough just to gather. But there's also that essence that if it's a part of you, if it's somehow inside of you, to be able to put out these beautiful creations of things. Like I
totally.
can vividly remember a spa night we had at your house. Okay.
Me too.
And
That was so fun.
as part of it was so fun. We had so many party favors. I remember one. It was in a paper that you crimped the edges so that it kind of like created this triangle like thing. And then inside of it was this mixture of herbs and yummy smellingness that we would steam our face with. Like, come on. Like that's incredible. But I love your recognition of like, that's great if it's inside of you, but if it's not, it's really enough.
Yeah. Well,
Yeah.
and I think as a culture, like as women, I feel like we are doing better at recognizing that both have its place, right?
Yeah.
Like
Mm-hmm.
we're doing better at recognizing that some people, they love the creativity of the
Mm-hmm.
detail and and other people, because I've been to these events where the details are just amazing and people really appreciate, because especially as you get older, you understand like what kind of effort goes into detail like that and
Mm-hmm.
thoughtfulness and all of that. And so it's like both have its place, because we also we're recognizing the importance of just gathering when things are not perfect. Like
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
even if your house isn't perfectly
Mm-hmm.
decorated, like my backyard is still not completely finished. Like we still have a few things to do. And but I think that's one of the beautiful things about getting older too, is like you don't care anymore. Like
Yeah.
you just know that people appreciate those gathering and somebody being willing to be the one to host and stuff
Yeah.
like that. Which leads
Mm-hmm.
me to another thing too, is I feel like we're all getting better at recognizing that, say you're craving that connection in your
Mm-hmm.
life and you're
Mm-hmm.
wanting to be more, you're wanting to pull people together and be part of connecting and stuff like that. I think we're all learning and getting better at being the one to do that. If that's what you want, then you need to be the one to do it. Like we
Yeah.
can't always just expect others to invite us.
Mm-hmm.
We need to be the ones to go out there and gather and put the effort in whatever way that means for us as well, you
Right.
know?
Right. Like if you're feeling a little bit of left out, that's really just a cue for you to create.
100%. And I
That's
feel
it.
like, thank heavens, this, luckily, I feel like this has always come a little bit naturally for me. Luckily, because we've moved
Mm-hmm.
multiple times.
Mm-hmm.
And so I can't be a person that's just like waiting and hoping to be invited. Like,
Yeah. Yeah.
I have to
Yeah.
like get to know people like every 2 to 5 years. It's like starting over.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
And it takes a solid year before you kind of know, have your bearings
at
straight.
least, at
Mm-hmm.
least, at
Mm-hmm.
least a solid year. I would say,
Yeah.
if not two, before you actually start to really feel kind of connected.
Right.
But yeah, it takes work.
Yeah. It's interesting as we were talking and as I was telling you that like, your name actually comes up a lot in our house because, you know, I will buy things. I'll purchase lots of things that are on your store. And I'm like, well, Lindsay Banner said it's the best. And Jake, my husband obviously knows you well.
I know. I think since starting this account, I've probably gone down on the husband's list of
No,
not maybe
no.
liking me quite as much sometimes.
Let me give you the contrary. The contrary is that Jake goes, he will pull out like a spatula and he will go, thank you, Lindsay Banner. And I don't know why, Linz. I don't know why we always say your first and your last name. Maybe there's more Lindsays that we know. I don't really know, but it's just so funny to me. So it's so great. It's so
It's
funny.
it's fun. It's
Yeah.
fun. That's funny.
But, as far as like, back in the old days and the things that we used to do as well, do you remember that cookbook that you put together and you called it Tried and True Recipes? Didn't you put that
Well, but
together?
well, I think I helped with that, but wasn't that like a
Yeah, it was
church
a
group effort? It was a church group
totally.
effort. Yeah.
Totally.
Yes.
But
But
but the
yeah.
point I can remember you saying the words tried and true. I can remember that over and over. And that's how I attribute like what you were doing now because you really help, you're obviously giving great suggestions all of the time, but there's a lot of times that's also this relief of you give the idea that I was looking for or that I needed for a Mother's Day gift or for a Christmas gift or whatever. And that's also like a really, really helpful thing. And I always come back to saying the words tried and true
Yeah.
with you. And I
Yeah.
don't probably because of that
Yeah.
history that we have there.
Yeah.
But on the flip side of everything that you're doing and that you're sharing these affiliate links for things that you love and the things that you've discovered and you continually find solutions for people, inside of that I feel like I have such a great feeling when I'm like clicking through your stuff. I already mentioned there's a little bit of an addiction there, but aside from that, is this feeling I get of balance because I feel like you always bring it back home. I feel like you always bring us to a flower field and you show us something and give us a different perspective, or you bring in something that is making a big difference in your life and in your soul in that space. And because you share that with us and you share with us the funny things, like I still laugh at your son, when he was like, oh, what did he say? And he goes, is it bussin' or disgusting? We're going to see. So
That was when I think we were traveling from we were traveling from like Kauai to Oahu or something. So we were on Hawaiian Airlines, and you know how they give you that Hawaiian juice, like guava juice or something they're known for on their airline. And my kids, we've always like Delta is like the only thing they really know. So
Yeah.
going on a new airline, they're like, what is this juice? Like what? And especially my little boy, he's like, I don't know. So Caitlin was like, okay, I'm going to video you while you try it and tell us what you think about it. And anyway, so at the time, bussin' was like the word.
Yeah, of course.
And, and his like repertoire of what he likes is like very small. So of course he's like, disgusting. Anyway, but all that to say, I feel like for so many things I could say in regards to like doing this account the past couple years. I had, as you I think know, I had an online business for almost 9 years where I did mostly like headbands and stuff. This was like so long ago when you could only find cute headbands in the boutiques for like $30 to $40. And I'm like, this is insane. This headband is made of a silk flower for like $1, and we are buying these headbands. And I was buying them because there was nowhere else to get them.
Yeah.
But I was buying these headbands for like $30 to $40 a piece, and I'm like, finally, when we were in San Clemente, I was like, I'm going to figure out how to make these. And so, long story short, figured it out, loved it, started selling them to all the boutiques down in Southern California. Was awesome. Moved to Arizona for my husband's job, had to, expand. And that's when I went online because I didn't know anybody at the time. And so my hobby was selling all these headbands, which was awesome. Like we hit it kind of right at the right time before a million other people started selling them. And it was super fun. It was so fun. I feel like I got to employ and work alongside the greatest women. Like we had so much fun. And a lot of them, it wasn't their full-time job. I had one or two full-time people for a while, but for the most part, it was a lot of women who just worked part-time for me. And anyway, but doing that for 9 years, and I started to have more and more kids, and my life got busier and busier. And is just a lot. Like even hiring, the mental load of it is just a lot. When you're in charge of like 10 to 12 people, it's just, you never can't not be thinking about it.
Yeah.
And we got to a point with my husband and I where he's like, do we just go all in with your business? Like, he's like, I'm happy to, like, if that's what, cause he was just so busy. I was so busy. We had, I think, 2 or 3 kids at that point. And we could tell it was going to get busier because we ended up having a fourth, and, life just gets more and more busy. And I just knew for sure I wanted to be a stay-at-home mom. Like that was a priority for me. And his job was going great too. So I'm like, no, you're doing great. You keep doing that. And so I slowly scaled back on that. And then I didn't do anything for about 5 to 7 years, like in the real thick of it with 4 babies and young and all of that. And I needed that. And that was so great. But then after a little bit, like the creative side of me, like definitely missed having something. But I also still really, it's always been really important to me to be present for my kids, especially sending them off to school, when they come home from school, all these different things. For me in particular, especially with a husband who has a really busy, demanding job, for me, that's what I wanted. And I say that because I really do think each woman is very different. Each mom is very different. What is best for their situation is all very different. It's such a unique personal decision on how any female, especially mother, decides to spend her time, working, not working, partly working, like in the home, out of the home. It's such a unique decision. But for me, with the husband being as busy as he was, like I needed to be 100% flexible because Mike could be gone out of town any minute, any day. And so I am literally the only one. And we usually are living away from family. We rarely lived by family. So it's really important that I was there for my kids, 100% available. So it took me a while to figure out what I wanted to do next when I finally did feel like I had more time to like put something into my life. And this is something, through a variety of ways I was led to, where it does give me 100% flexibility. And I needed it to be something fun and uplifting. I felt like as a stay-at-home mom, I already had plenty of to-dos that weren't super fun all the time. So I needed something that was fun. I also like the business side of things, and so all that to say, I can't just do links. Like, yes, finding products that help us all, that work for us all, that are like something you want to share with your sister, right away, of all these different things. Like, that's really fun. And that is, I think, useful and helpful. But I just haven't been able to do it without making it like personal too. Like, I don't feel like I'd enjoy it near as much if I wasn't connecting with my people like
Yeah.
on a more personal level. I like it wouldn't fulfill me. So it's selfish, but it wouldn't fulfill me if I didn't allow some crossover of personal. And that's what I'm drawn to
Mhm.
on social media. Like,
Yeah.
I do need a little bit of a personal connection usually for, I don't know, I appreciate a little bit of a personal connection. And so I
Yeah.
let it be what I want it to be.
Well, I think that having that personal connection helps you figure out and be more in tune with what they need, what they
Yeah.
actually need. I remember there was a story about Winston Churchill, and he was, you know, in the mix of all of this political stuff. And one day he just decided to ride the train. And when he rode the train and he just listened to the people, it changed, like it was pivotal for him. So I always try to remember that story. I think it was on like a movie that I watched. And it was just, and to me, it's just like always coming back to like leveling in and having that true connection,
Yeah.
with the people that you serve.
Yeah.
Yeah. So good.
And I also am open to, I feel like, especially when you are a person where being a mom has been like one of your main priorities in life, then the other things you do in life, um, can kind of ebb and flow, and they can kind of evolve over time. And I'm still I feel like I'm in the very beginning stages of figuring out how I want this to be and what I want it to be. And I think just doing it, because I like read about, researched all the different things of like how this works and stuff on the backside for a long time. But then just diving in and just doing it helps you more than anything to like really figure out what you want that to be ultimately. And you'll
Hmm.
kind of adjust and get it to where you really
Hmm.
want it to be.
Yeah.
So,
I feel like you just being able to say there's a lot of self-expression in you just showing up as who you are in whatever it
mhm.
is that you're doing. Whatever it is that you're doing. If you're, being that stay-at-home mom and throwing some parties, if you are raising kids that are a little bit older, if you're trying to tackle anything with the business or whatever, I think that it just goes to show that the more that you can be yourself, um, the more that essentially, like, the floodgates start to open. I feel like that's just a good truth.
Yeah.
So,
Well, and being okay, I feel like this is another thing that just comes with age, but the older you get, the more you realize we are all so different. We are all
mhm,
so unique in a lot of
mhm,
ways. We're all the same in the most ways, but we all also have a very unique set of things we can offer to our families, to the world, what have you. And I think just being okay with whatever that is, and like being open to like discovering what that is, and being okay with like, I think a lot of people don't do a lot of things in life because they're too worried about what anyone will think or what have you. And I
yeah,
think
yeah,
just being open to like whatever like really speaks to you is so important. And it's also like one of the most important things. We're currently in that process of trying to help one of our kids in particular, like just really own who you are, and like
yeah,
own the things that you're also not perfect in. Like,
hmm,
you are so good. We all have a whole list of things that we are so gifted at and so good at, but you also need to own what you haven't mastered yet and be
hmm,
okay with that. Like,
yeah,
draw your confidence, make sure you're drawing your confidence from the right places so that you can be okay with all of it. You can
hmm,
own all the things that you really are so great at, you're also not afraid to own the things that you haven't mastered yet. It's
Hmm.
okay. Don't let it hold you back.
Yeah. So, do you have any really great tricks? Because I feel like when you're teaching teenagers, I feel like teenagers it's like one thing to hear it from a parent. It's a whole nother thing when they're walking down those, hallways at school to own what you're saying. And,
Yeah.
initially I would say that like what they model, what we model for them, they also become. And so that part is really important. But what would you say in speaking to, I don't know, just what do you give your teenagers? How do you really coax them into being their own person and accepting everything that they actually really aren't? And that's just giving themselves grace.
Yeah. I feel like you have caught me in the midst of trying to figure this out myself for sure. I feel like maybe what has moved the dial a little bit, and I still
Mhm.
feel like we have a long way to go. Like I do feel like we have to constantly remind ourselves that as adults, a lot of these things took us. We've just
Yeah.
recently started to get better at a lot of things, right?
Hmm.
So I don't think we should be shocked that certain things are our struggle for our kids, and owning their weaknesses is probably going to take some time. I have found with one of my kids in particular, all of my kids actually, is constantly reminding them of their strengths. Number one, to help
Mm.
them build that foundation. Also, constantly reminding them, like as adults, we are learning what strengthens our foundation. How do we keep that foundation strengthened? What are the habits we do every day
Yeah.
that kind of build that foundation? Because these kids they're just starting to learn that. So
Hmm.
it's like having these conversations constantly. I feel like we have to
Hmm.
have these conversations over and over and over. Like it's going to take a while for it to really sink in for them. But
Yeah.
like talking about what are the things that we as adults do to like
Hmm.
strengthen that foundation? There are things that we all do to like build that foundation for ourselves. And then also just repeatedly talking about all the different ways they have succeeded and they are succeeding and why they are so great and everything. So then it makes owning the weaker part not as scary because
Hmm.
they've been so built up
Mm.
with
Great.
all the many things that they are so good at and all the many things they have to look forward to in their life and why they are so great and why they are so strong and everything. So then it's not so scary to also be like, okay, and none of us are sent to this earth perfect.
Yeah.
Like we all have been given weaknesses, all
Hmm.
of us, right?
Hmm.
So it's kind of like taking away the stigma and the scariness of, and I think for parents too, especially as a younger parent, I think when we're younger parents, we all are like, oh no, my kid is like not great at this. Is
Yeah.
that going to like ruin their life? Oh my gosh. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Whereas as we get older, we recognize that even the most amazing people on this earth that do TED Talks and stuff have major weaknesses, right?
Yes.
So it's okay. It's
Yeah.
okay it's okay that we aren't perfect yet. It's okay that
Hmm.
they aren't perfect yet. Um,
Yeah. Super
it's
good.
emotional. It's
Hmm.
emotional. I mean, yesterday for a minute I was like, are we gonna make you know? So it's definitely, you have highs and lows, but none of us are perfect. None of us
Yeah.
were sent to this earth like just nailing it in every
Yeah.
way.
Yeah.
So
100%. Yeah, I love that you talk about like what we do as adults to sort of have that solid foundation and that balance. And I think that that's also something that you share with your audience, which is what I love, because I think that a huge part of us finding power and our own personal, like what exists and resides inside of us, is in the essence of the way that we balance our life. And I feel like you share so much of that. But maybe here, just tell us some of the foundational things that you feel like are just not negotiable for your own personal life that help you make sure that your trajectory is on so that you can have and achieve that feeling like consistently.
I feel like what we consume, and I feel like this is something we as a world are getting better at.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I think we all have to be super aware of what we're consuming. I have to be aware of what I'm consuming for sure, you know?
Mm-hmm.
Like,
Yeah.
I have to be consuming, for me, I like scriptures, conference talks from my church that grounds me a lot
Yeah.
are huge for me. Um, Exercise is like hugely mental health thing for me for
Mm-hmm.
sure that I've
Mm-hmm.
learned. Um, Another thing that I feel like, which is actually the whole reason I started, like one of the main reasons I started doing my Instagram business is I feel like we have to, for me, I have to build fun, happy things into my life
Yeah.
to counterbalance the hard.
Yeah.
I feel like there's always going to be hard. There's always like we have seasons of I mean, I don't feel like many seasons where everything's just so easy and great. I feel like there's always, at least in my experience, there's always some really hard stuff going on in life. And so I have to have some fun, uplifting things to look forward to that kind of counterbalance the hard to
Mm-hmm.
like get me through the hard stuff.
Yeah.
And,
Yeah.
like, so this Instagram account has kind of been one of those things for me where it's like fun. I've connected with some of like the greatest people through it and stuff. So, and it's different for everybody, whatever that looks like, whatever that is different for everybody.
Yeah.
But that's a really important thing. And so I feel like, like we all know like what helps our, like, and eating, I feel like is another thing. Like, we all know that how we nourish our body, both mentally, physically, everything has a direct effect on us. And so, to a certain degree, like what I eat definitely affects me too. So,
Yeah. There's a quote that says, there's no such thing as a work life balance. There are work life choices, and you make them, and they have consequences. And it just literally sums up like what you're saying. It's like what our life consists of are the choices that we make every day,
yeah,
and the balance that we strive for. We really have to be proactive in that creation of it. When you were
yeah.
talking about like we have to be careful about what we consume, I recently just listened to a book where there, and I was listening, and there was a guy who has a Scottish accent. And literally, like when I would be done, like when I would be, I'll be cooking dinner and listening to the book. And then like I feel like talking in a Scottish accent. And that is like a tiny little piece of evidence of how when I start to think in that accent and I'm not reading the book, that book is making an impression on me.
100%. Well, even like what we're like, I feel like a lot of people these days, like a lot of people don't have much time for TV, like at all. And so I feel like the only time I really sometimes watch TV is when I'm folding laundry or something.
Mhm.
And even that lately, I feel like it is so hard to find something to watch that, and podcasts too. Like, I feel like you have to be aware, even if it's not necessarily deemed a bad show or anything, like,
Yeah.
you do have to really be aware of how you're feeling, like, after watching that. And
Yeah.
whether it be podcasts, whether it be the people you follow on Instagram, whether it be Netflix, like, those things have such an impact on your spirit and just how you feel
Yeah.
that you kind of have to keep everything in check. And like, even like truly things that are like so many people watch, they're not necessarily bad, but like it doesn't leave me with the feeling
Yeah.
I want. You know what I'm
Yeah.
saying?
Yeah. 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 No, literally, I feel like I remember hearing that, once we start to, when we really start to grow, when we start to prefer education over entertainment, you know, and that's not
Yeah.
being said to, say that we cannot have any entertainment in our life. I mean, I literally feel gypped if I don't watch a movie on the weekends. I love
Yeah.
snuggling up and curling up, and I am mindful of the choices that I make
Yeah.
when
And
I'm
I do think
doing.
that is a needed thing too.
Totally, totally. But essentially it's just that. It's like that is also comes back to balance, right? That comes back to, and I think that we used to be a little bit more content. Maybe it's age, but I really do think that like the population as a whole used to be a little bit more content just being entertained. And I think that we seek for more education because we really
Hmm.
do have it more available to us. There
Yeah.
is so much more information. I mean, we just got this dog and there's so much information about how to do the puppy thing, you know,
Hmm.
and I was talking to it's a funny story. I was in a I was in a car with a police officer and I was having car trouble and he was taking me to like the next town over. And because we were up in the mountains, there was like no service.
Yeah.
And and that was like really watching like the true essence of people come out because there's no cell phone service. And so people who are stopping to help and stuff, it was kind of like retroactive and going back in the day when that used to be like the only way that you would get out
Yeah.
of trouble off of the side of the road.
Yeah.
But I was having this
Yeah.
conversation with this police officer as he was giving me a ride over to the town next to us so that I could pick up some antifreeze and all the business. And I said, I was talking to him about his children and their relationship and the way that we talk. And we were kind of delineating how interesting it is that we used to have closer connections to our parents. Like, I would say that my parents had a closer connection with their parents because when they didn't know something, they called mom and dad as they were raising their kids, as they were doing anything. For the most part,
So
they would
true.
call mom and dad, right? Or
Yeah.
someone else in their life that was like a mentor for them or whatever. And these days, we just look it up on Google.
Yeah.
Like, there's no need
Yeah.
for a phone call.
So crazy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think it
Yeah.
robs us of that connection
Yeah.
that used to have to be there so that
Yeah.
we could kind of like be like, oh, that's what you do? Oh, okay. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah. It is kind of crazy when you think about all the different things of, how we're connected nowadays has taken away so much of the old types of connection,
Yeah.
that
Yeah.
are still so important. And we're like learning how to put that back up on the priority list because we're
Yeah.
seeing some of the negative effects of not having that, right?
100%. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, crazy.
Let's talk a little bit about the balance that you help your kids with. I know that you really help them in sports. I know that you really help them in a lot of things that they're doing. Anything come to mind with the ways that you have helped them recognize and step into their power inside of what's happening in their inner state, right? Inside of them, like in their heart, in their mind, and being able to, a lot of times, kids, teenagers, they don't automatically let you into that space. We have to kind of like nuzzle our way in there. I was going to say weasel. That's nuzzle's way better. You know, we kind of have to get in there and share in that space with them so that we can kind of have that ebb and flow of I'm here for you. I got your back. And guess what? I can help you through this.
Yeah,
So I think that as parents, we're going to have to be doing that more, not only as our kids are teenagers, but as they're growing because of like what we just talked about,
yeah,
keeping that connection better. So
yeah,
what have you found? What have
yeah.
you walked through with your kids in their activities, in their sports, and in the things that they've been up against that you've been able to help them with?
I feel like once again, you've caught me in the midst of trying to figure this out because, I feel like that's one of our biggest challenges as parents these days. I honestly feel like my biggest challenge as a parent is limiting electronics in all ways.
Mm-hmm.
I
Amen. Mm-hmm.
I feel like you could easily let your kids just be taken care of and distracted
Yeah.
24/7 if you are not constantly actively, which is leads me back to why for me, I think one of the main reasons it's always been really important for me to be home
Mm-hmm.
is because I know for sure if I was not here when my kids are here, they will just be on electronics the whole time.
Mm-hmm.
And I have always had like a huge, like it's just made me sick to think about
Yeah.
that.
Hmm.
And so, number one, I feel like I'm constantly limiting, aware of how much time they're on Xbox or their phones. I feel like them having to figure out what to do and being bored is like they have to have that. They have
Yeah.
to have time where they're not just mindlessly
Yeah.
on electronics. I feel like
Hmm.
that's number one. Um, I feel like I take every opportunity to drive them anywhere I can, especially if it's a longer thing, because that is one of the only ways nowadays where we're like forced to
Be in
be
the
right
car.
next to each
Hmm.
other, having conversations, things like
Hmm.
that. And honestly, I feel like, and I need to figure out other ways to do this too, but I feel like when they've had trials and challenges, those have been the times where we've been able to connect the most because they're hurting or they're struggling. And so they're sometimes, not always, but sometimes a little more willing to talk with you because they're looking for solutions. They're looking for help. They're looking for support. And
Yeah.
oftentimes, like when a challenge has arisen with one of my kids, whatever it may be, I feel like it used to be like, oh no, oh my gosh, a trial, like you just want your kids to just
Yeah.
be
Yeah.
seamlessly moving through life and just thriving in
Yeah.
every way, right? So when they have something arise, it used to be just like, oh no, oh my gosh, did I do something wrong as a parent? Like, all these
Hmm.
different things. Whereas nowadays, I'm starting to be like, this often leads to a lot of connection and a lot of growth and a lot
Hmm.
of opportunity.
Hmm.
Like
Yeah.
their harder things in life is what has taught them. Like them sailing through life hasn't taught them a ton.
Yeah.
Like,
Hmm.
I seriously, I look at all my kids and the hardest things each of them have gone through have been where they have the most growth. They build a stronger foundation, through those times, and we grow closer as
Yeah.
parents. And so I do feel like it's an ongoing, something that I'm constantly trying to do better at because we're all so busy. And so an hour or two can easily go by where everybody's just on their electronics doing their own thing. And
Yeah.
so it is seriously the hardest part of parenting is actively, and just like a lot of times they don't want to hear like, hey, everyone off your electronics,
Yeah.
because
Yeah.
they're
Yeah.
so used to having it 24/7. And so trying to just build in opportunities where they don't even think about electronics or want to be off on electronics is like, I feel like my constant challenge,
Yeah.
you know?
I remember you put a list together with I think your youngest daughter, and it was kind of like all of these activities that she could do,
Yes,
right?
yes,
Talk about that a
yes,
little bit.
yes. Well, I feel like with my kids, it doesn't ever work when I'm the one telling them the solutions, when I'm the one like, you need to do this, you need to do that.
Yeah.
Like it
You have
never
to make
works.
them think it's their idea. That is the
Yeah.
trick.
And,
Yeah.
and so, yeah, it's like, okay, she at least got to the point where it's like, okay, we recognize there's a problem. We at least agree on that, right?
Hmm.
We
Hmm.
recognize that we need to fill our lives with better things than just scrolling on electronics, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So why don't you come up with the list? You tell me, what do you think are good ideas and what are the ways you want to spend your life? What do
Hmm.
you want to do? That's way more effective, I think, always in like pretty much every situation than us just telling them what to
Yeah.
do, right?
Yeah, and essentially that applies to every single one of us. I think that a lot of times what happens with our teenagers, we see it happen with us too. My teens, they like want to get their stuff done so that then they can be free. And that means they can go to electronics, right? And
Right.
so when you start to notice that as a pattern as a parent, and definitely I feel and think about things way more than I try to say them because that would be just overwhelming for them with how much I think about how much I really don't want them to play electronics, right? And try to
Yeah.
divert their attention to something else or to be doing something else. Um, and because that does work. It's like let's have more activities and other things that we're participating in so that the electronics kind of stay at bay. But the better thing is to learn how to just have time without electronics. Because
Yeah.
then the moment that they're done with all of their things, they want to actually just dive right in. And it's like,
Yeah.
no, what I'm
Yeah.
trying to teach you is a different essence, a different way of operating. The
Yeah.
wrong move would be to try to keep you as busy as I can so that I'm keeping you
Right.
away. The right move would be to teach you how you actually feel and how you need that downtime where you're in your room without any electronics, you know, organizing something or creating something or, you know, whatever it is. And so coming up with
Yeah.
that list, like what your daughter did, it's great for all of us to kind of sit down and say, these are the things like that I want to do with my free
Yeah.
time when I get
Yeah.
free time, you
Yeah.
know?
Yeah. No, I do feel like it's the ongoing constant challenge. And
Mhm.
in
Yeah.
addition to that, when they are on electronics, that's a whole other thing I feel like we're trying to teach them is to be so mindful of what they choose to consume. I feel like
Yeah.
that's a whole other issue,
Yeah.
right?
Totally.
Is
Hmm.
making sure, like I was saying for me, like things that aren't necessarily bad or anything, but like if you're watching somebody do a makeup tutorial for hours on end, so what are you thinking about all the time is like
Yeah.
how
Again,
perfect
back
your
to,
makeup has to be or like you know you're kind of trying to help them expand how what they consume shifts their thinking. Like
mm-hmm.
it is so much deeper than I think our kids realize.
Yeah.
And even a lot of adults, I feel like a lot of adults aren't really realizing how things are affecting them
True.
on a deeper level.
Mm-hmm.
And so like you really have to be so
Mm-hmm.
mindful of what you're consuming. And I think it's clearly still a problem in our culture because I feel like I hear of adults all the time, like deleting Instagram as a whole and everything, where I'm like,
Mm-hmm.
we've got to, as a culture, learn that there's a way to set ourselves up
Mm-hmm.
so that what we're consuming on these different platforms builds us up, isn't just making us feel deflated,
Like that let down.
right?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. Shifting, coming into something else, being in
Yeah.
a different energy, paying attention to the vibration, all of that.
Yeah.
Yeah. One of the
100%.
things I love to do with my kids is I love to give them a head massage, and I swear it unlocks something for them, like a head massage or a foot massage, but just something to where they're just sitting there. And then when I ask them questions, they're like so much more open because they're enjoying something and they're not being taken away from something essentially. And
Yeah.
it's kind of like this magic little essence. And so I also like to apply that to us. Like, in what ways can we provide an environment where we're getting the head massage? Like, you know what I'm saying? Where we're getting
Yeah.
that comfort, that, where we just kind of sit and maybe we do a little yoga class or whatever it is for us, where we're allowing ourselves to shift back, and come into a space where it's not even that we're intentionally doing or not doing something. We are just like in a space where we can be, you know? Yeah.
hmm I feel like for me too, like part of that is just turning everything off.
Yeah.
Like sometimes you just need silence. Like
Yeah.
that's what you
Mm-hmm.
really need in the world we live in right now.
Yeah.
Sometimes like you just crave turning everything off, because when I walk, I'll like go on walks every day, walk the dog every day. And a
Mm.
lot of times that's like listening to podcasts, listening to good stuff,
Yeah,
right?
sure. Sure.
All the time, or working or doing this. So it's all good stuff. But then there's many times too where it's like, I need to
Yeah.
just walk and just nothing.
Hear myself and yeah,
Yeah.
just nothing. Just be with myself and the earth and
Yeah.
allow myself to breathe and be here in this moment. Yeah. I love it. What in the arena of balance have you found when life is really hard? Like when life throws you tough things, is it the same answer that we keep circling back to? Is there anything that you know, essentially do to be able to manage? Because, at our age, we've got our parents, we've got our kids. Like, you are literally in a tug of war where you're being pulled all the different directions and needing to show up for lots of people, and is there anything that you have to say around the ways that we can show up for all of the areas, all of the places?
I do feel like it's pretty much the same things that we've talked about because I do feel like I have had some pretty big struggles with my parents as far as like they've had their own struggles, which has led me to being a support to them.
Mm-hmm.
One in particular, like far more sometimes than them being able to be a support to me.
For sure.
And for most of my life, almost all of my adult life, I've needed to play a supporting role to them. And so I have been raising my kids, trying to learn all that and raise my four kids, which is where my priority goes to for sure. But simultaneously, sometimes having some really big roles in supporting my parents as well, right? And so I feel like most of my life has been, I've had a lot of like really challenging periods of life. And I do feel like you just come back to that absolute foundation of figuring out what your foundation is, being really clear on what your foundation is and what your just what your core values are, what your core priorities are. Taking care of myself mentally and physically has definitely it's very clear that that is what allows me to then turn around and serve those around me who need the support and need the love and need the help, right? Like if we
100%.
don't take care of ourselves to a certain degree first, we're not even going to be able to be there. And sometimes that means taking a step back, you know, with my kids, sometimes letting them kind of get through something here and there and kind of recalibrating myself is what is actually best for them. But especially with my parents too, because, my priority is my kids. And
Yeah.
so when I'm feeling really overwhelmed, especially when I'm already overwhelmed with my own kids, then taking a step back from things here and there is what allows me to kind of do the marathon of
Hmm.
supporting through trials and harder things, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Really great point because it brings me to like picturing myself standing in my bathroom and filling up my little vitamin thing and maybe cleaning something or taking extra care in what I'm cooking.
Yeah, isn't it funny how those, because and it kind of depends on the situation or what have you, right? But yeah, it's like sometimes when things are so hard and really challenging, that's when you need like one of the most simple, basic things, right? Whether it be a bath, whether it be go to
Yeah.
bed early that night,
Hmm.
whether it be take more time to make dinner, that you almost like have
Yeah.
to like slow
Hmm.
things down to a ridiculously slow pace for a minute
Yeah. Yes. Yeah.
before you can like really jump in
Right.
there sometimes, right?
Right. Right. And I think seeing that the levels of life and the way that we live sometimes comes back to we have the foundational things that we do that we say like this is a non-negotiable in my life, like connecting to God, meditation,
Hmm.
exercise, whatever the kind of checklist of your daily things are that you do.
Right.
But essentially being able to see that when life demands more or asks more, maybe it requires us to sit in silence more so that we can receive more answers. Maybe it requires us to go a little bit slower so that we can really, really care for ourselves so that then we're open for the opportunity to be caring for others or to be having something flow through us that is needed by them or whatever it is. And I just love seeing that balance inside of all of the different areas that we show up. Call it every day, call it being in the tug of war, the sandwich in between lots of things that are happening in our life. Or, being there to be able to be inside your kid's mind for a minute, You know what
Yeah.
I mean?
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah. No, I do feel like you do kind of have to like slow down for a minute sometimes to be able to, and giving yourself a ton of grace during that time, especially too. Like
yeah,
there are some days where I'm like, I am not going to win this part of the day today.
yeah,
And that is totally okay because
yeah,
tomorrow will come. Like
yeah,
tomorrow will continue to come and come and come. And you'll have every opportunity to do things differently the next day or what have you. But like sometimes your so much of your effort has to like funnel into one area of your life
mhm,
that you do learn to give yourself so much grace in so many other areas of life, right?
yeah,
Especially
uh-huh,
during that time. And it's
mhm,
okay because you'll be able to recalibrate and you'll be able to get everything back up to the level you want it and everything eventually. But it's totally okay. Sometimes we
yeah,
have to be so okay with the smallest wins.
yeah, yeah, 100%. So I feel like I only, I know that I only have you for a couple more minutes. And I'm curious because you're always on the other side of the camera. And yes, you talk to your audience sometimes, but a lot of it is suggesting the things that are keeping your life in balance and also sharing all of the things that you love. Is there anything that's on your heart that you wish you could share even with your audience that sometimes behind the scenes, behind the camera, that you don't get to say every single day to them?
Like I talked about before, I feel like there's still going to be some evolving of what this little account is and what I will do with it. It's funny because I would love to be in front of the camera way more than I am,
Yeah.
but it feels like I'm at such a pinnacle of busyness with my own family right now that that feels like a very big relationship I'm
Yeah.
not quite able to take on yet, right?
Mm,
I
mm.
don't know why, but like mentally, if I'm in front of the camera so much, it feels like, well, then I need to be able to show up in front of the camera all the time. And I am not there yet. You know what I'm saying? Like,
I think you just need to show up in your bathrobe and like, your hair going crazy one time to see that like maybe that doesn't really matter. However, I will say it's the energy of what you're doing when you show up. It's the energy of that exchange that I can completely relate because I think early in my journey, I was like bouncing around to like lots of different topics because going deep into a space of like what's happening on our insides and like what's happening with our heart, what might be like what we might need to be walking through that's difficult with, trauma or challenges or
yeah,
processing or all of that stuff was
yeah,
hard for me. That was at bay because I was dealing with so many other things. So I get it.
yeah,
I
yeah.
totally get that.
Well, and I will say another thing that I think is tricky is, not that I envy people going through other types of trials, but
Yeah,
there are types of trials that you can be very open about, right? Because
I agree. Hmm.
it doesn't infringe on anybody's privacy. It is either all solely like people who go through cancer and stuff, they can be pretty open about that if they choose to be, right? Because
Sure.
it affects them and it's kind of limited to them. Yes, it affects their family stuff, but it's their experience. Whereas a lot of my challenges in life and trials in life are because of other people and because of their privacy and me wanting to respect their privacy and wanting to protect, just protect them.
Yeah,
I
that's
don't
a
get to
respect.
be,
Hmm.
yeah,
Yeah.
I don't get
Hmm.
to be as vocal and open about a lot of things that
Yeah.
are my particular trials,
Yeah.
because I do care about these people and, so I will say there is a lot, and I would imagine this is true for so many people online. There are certain types of trials and stuff you can be so transparent about and so open book about online, right?
Hmm.
But my particular challenges that I've had in life, for the most part, I don't get to be, I wish I could, like if it were
Yeah.
just me and if it
Yeah.
just affected me, I'd be taught, like my whole
Hmm.
page would be about certain but I don't get to be. And so, I think someday I might be able to be a little bit more open about it. But
Hmm.
for now, I feel like, and you've seen, like sometimes I'll share things and I will allude to trials or what have you,
Yeah, yeah,
but I do wish I could be more, transparent sometimes about trials and stuff because I think there are a lot of people out there who struggle with a lot of the same things.
mhm,
And,
yeah,
it's tricky, you
yeah.
know?
I totally understand. I have a lot of one-on-one clients that I talk to about a
Yeah.
lot of stuff that they go through. And
Yeah. Which leads me to another reminder, which I think again we're all getting much better at,
yeah,
but like you don't always know what people are dealing with and everything. So you do have to really take everything with a grain of salt that you see online because not because people don't always necessarily want to share with you, not because they're hiding anything, not because they don't wish they could be more transparent, but there are a lot of things in this world that people have to protect other people's privacy and protect other people's feelings so they don't get to be. So
yeah,
you need to be very careful of the way you see things online and
yeah,
always be giving people so much grace and also
yeah,
giving yourself so much grace because you're not seeing the whole of it, right?
yeah, yeah, yeah. And I think that the tricky thing inside of our struggles, inside of our trials, I think that when we hear someone else talk about, when they're going through it, like when when I
Hmm.
talk about being a pregnant teenager, all of a sudden it gives
Hmm.
somebody else the space to be like, oh my
Yeah,
gosh, I went through that too. And then they can see different ways of the ways that they handled it or whatever. And when somebody steps up to the plate and says that, I follow an influencer whose husband um, struggles with porn heavily, and
yeah, yeah,
another one that has a lot of issues with their daughter in a certain way, so it's just
yeah,
it's like when you can zero in on the thing and you can get help inside of the struggle that you're in, that's a great
yeah,
gift and a great blessing. And I feel like that's what you are addressing, that maybe things will come forward in a different way in the future that you'll be able to
yeah,
zero in and really help people with. But I
yeah,
think even the essence of just the way that we address and we say, like, I am in a struggle. And so it's safe to assume that lots of people are in a struggle.
yeah,
It's
yeah,
kind of like, remember when the teacher said, if you have a question, it's chances are like lots of people have that question in class.
yeah,
It's really the same in life. And so it kind of just boils down to, like you said, respecting space of other people and also the idea that everybody's experiencing some level of needing to keep the balance and dealing with that idea of keeping their foundation strong so that they can serve and show up for other people.
yeah,
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 I love how you brought that
100%.
forward today. And in all the days, you're doing such a great job and in really supporting people's like passions and good things, in their life, and also helping them come back to, hey, let's take a moment and think about something totally different, like
Yeah,
totally different.
yeah,
So
yeah.
I love the way that you do that and the way that you show up,
You
Lindsay.
are so sweet. You are
Yeah.
so sweet. Thank you.
Yeah. And thank you for being here with us today. If you guys could see what I'm seeing, she's literally sitting on a couch with the hydrangeas in full bloom behind her and this cute little pup next to her side. And it is a gorgeous day outside. It's just literally picturesque. It's
It's so
picturesque.
fun.
Yeah.
We gotta take it in while these hydrangeas are in full bloom because we all know where we're headed.
That's that's a big amen. That's a big amen. More for you where you live with all the snow than where
I
I live. But
know, I know, I know, Mish. I wish we could do this every day.
right, I know. It's so great.
So great,
We need to
so
do it
great.
more. Well,
Yes,
thanks for coming. So thank you for coming on the podcast. We love you, Lindsay, and everything you're up to.
thank you for having me.
100%. I hope that you found a few great takeaways from this podcast with Lindsay Banner and the ways that she showed us that when we choose to make habits to live a balanced life, we really do have more access to our power. Once again, I just want to say thank you to Lindsay for coming on the podcast, and a reminder to you that I'll leave all of the ways that you can find Lindsay in the show notes of this podcast. Don't forget to subscribe to the Mindset Check podcast so that you don't miss any episodes in the future. And we would also love it if you rate and review the podcast. That actually really helps the algorithm boost the performance of our show. So we really, really appreciate you doing those things. Right now, I just want to say thank you to Cage, who left a review on the Audible platform. The review says, engaging and relatable. Misha is so fun and down to earth. She has a gift of helping others through her own life experience. I always leave feeling so much better after each episode. Definitely worth the listen. Thanks again, Cage. I really appreciate your review. All right, and before we go, I want to leave you with this incredible quote that says, balance is not something you find, it's something you create. That quote is from Jenna Kingsford, and I love that it just refers to balance as a constant, mindful practice of nurturing all aspects of your life so that you are more resilient and capable to be able to address your life, to be able to handle what's in your life, and really to live your life in really fun and engaging ways. Thank you so much for being with us today. Until next time, my friend.